lights are bright. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm thinking of the scene in a movie I feel like I've seen where someone takes his speech and rips it in half, and I'm thinking about doing that, but I'm not going to. There are a few points on here that I'd like, this is an outline, that I'd like to refer to. So I have my timer up here. No, it's okay. Thank you. You're too kind. So I am going to start in a different way from my introduction. I wish the lights were not so bright and I could see some of your faces. I just see this sort of darkness and these bright lights. But, you know, clearly from, hey, look at that. Thank you. So clearly I'm very different from the other candidates who've spoken before me. And I've had the honor and pleasure of meeting many of you at the different county committee Democratic forums and around the state, but I'm definitely very different, and I think many of you are wondering, you know, maybe why is this candidate even in the race? I don't have any supporters up here. I don't have any signs out front. I actually don't like fundraising. It's something maybe none of you do either, but you do it. But I'm an idealist, and I live by the words of Gandhi as being the change I wish to see in the world, and I'm actually a very sensitive person. Oh, thank you. I was going to ask, there may be a lot of things that you agree or disagree with, but if I could ask something a little different, if you wouldn't mind, because I'm different, if you wouldn't mind holding your applause until the end, I'd appreciate it. So just to say a little bit about me, which is different from a typical campaign speech, but I think everything about my candidacy has been very different from the standard way that politics have been practiced in this country and in this state. As I say, I don't like fundraising. I don't really like promoting myself. I consider myself a man of ideas, and I've had ideas and visions and dreams of building a better world ever since I was a small child. And when I was even in kindergarten, I learned about the history of war in the world, and I knew this was not the way that we were meant to live as human beings. But I'm not your typical political candidate. At the same time, I think the status quo is really not working at all, and that maybe we could use someone in public office who is a little bit too shy even to write to his best friends and ask for a $5 contribution because of a feeling of my feelings would be hurt if they said no. So that's a little backup. That's an explanation of why I don't have massive crowds. If I come to the 2014, I'll probably try to organize some more people. But just to tell you a little bit about myself, my name is Benjamin Pollard, as you know. I grew up in Blue Hill, and I showed this slideshow to show you a little bit about the village, the town where I grew up. Some of you may have been to Blue Hill, but I think that's one place where you should have gone. But I think it's one of the most beautiful villages in the world, and I've traveled extensively. Both the architectural buildings as well as the natural beauty. And this is the village where I grew up and where I learned to love America and also to love nature. And these are two themes that are guiding my candidacy. And this parade has a lot of sentimental value to me. It's a tradition for me. I rode my bicycle in the parade and for a number of years, and I marched as a Boy Scout and as a member of the George Stevens Academy Band. And it just tells you a little bit about where I come from, and I think where I learned the values that I think many of us share, of loving this state and loving this country and dreaming of how do we make it the country that we know we're capable of creating. I'd like to talk about three themes of my campaign. As I say, I consider myself someone who has a number of ideas, and the three themes I'll discuss will be national security, economic prosperity, and ecological sustainability. And so first, turning to national security, we are in an incredibly dangerous situation right now. And since the invention of the atomic bomb, thankfully since the end of World War II, we haven't had another incident of a detonation of a nuclear device. However, this has been thanks to Providence, and I think it's really time that we stop depending on Providence and start taking matters into our hands as far as creating a more peaceful world. Right now, the immediate situation is Iran having that water. You know what? No, sorry. Yeah, this will be something. So Iran, I'm sorry, it was a serious situation, but Iran is now on the cusp of developing a nuclear weapon. And, well, theoretically, otherwise, if it were civilian energy purposes, it's unlikely they would build such a deep underground bunker. And we have Israel on the verge of threatening preemptive strikes, or talking about this. And we have a new young leader in North Korea who's unproven and an unstable situation there. And what Albert Einstein said soon after the invention of the atomic bomb, he said the splitting of the atom has changed everything save our way of thinking, and thus we drift toward unparalleled catastrophe. And so we really need to look at the dynamics of the world and what can we do to project more goodwill around the world and to project an image of America that's positive, that creates love and admiration around the world rather than fear and even hatred in many parts of the world. And I think there are a number of things we can do to improve America's image. One thing is improving our record of respecting civil liberties, both abroad in terms of how we deal with the enemy in the war on terror, and so-called, and here at home. And we need to recognize that the war on terror is not effective, that we are not reducing the number of enemies through our drone attacks and assassination campaign, but we're giving terrorist organizations recruiting tools through these techniques. So we really need to be vigilant about here at home protecting civil liberties and being very mindful and respectful of the sovereignty of our allies and nations around the world and the civil liberties of those, even terrorist suspects, and ending practices such as indefinite suspension without charge. I'll tell you a story. I rehearsed the speech a little with my mother and father, and heard don't be all policy because that'll be boring. Also, I need to try to find humor, but it's hard. Humor is kind of one of these things that it's hit or miss, and if you miss, it's worse than not having swung at all. But in any case, I'll tell a story. I was an exchange student in Bordeaux, France, and in my junior year of high school, and I was on a train with a Canadian friend who was also an exchange student, and we met an American soldier, and we were talking to this soldier. And this woman came up in her 50s perhaps, and she actually fell on her knees and started kissing his hand. And she was speaking in French, and I was translating, and she was saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you. When I was a teenage girl, you saved my village." And so this had a very, very powerful effect, very moving effect on me. And this is the way that I viewed America growing up and as a young adolescent, is that we were a force for good. And we were there to liberate the oppressed people. And as I learned more about the history of American foreign policy, I learned that our track record has been far from exemplary, both before and after World War II. But in particular, this problem that Eisenhower warned us of the military-industrial complex, has become a very major part of American foreign policy. And so many wars have been fought, as you all know, not for altruistic reasons, but for the economic interests of the nation and for larger corporations. So we need to stop that right away and really focus on protecting freedom and human rights. And in particular, standing up to those worst human rights abusers, and I would say China in particular. I would like to make a statement here about the importance of all of us. The issue of Tibet has largely been dropped from the Obama administration's priorities, and especially since 2008 with the protests leading up to the Olympic Games, the oppression there has gotten extremely severe. And this is, geopolitically, the issue of Tibet has been a buffer between China and India for 2,000 years, and now the Chinese border is armed and the Indian border in Tibet. So we really need to stand up to China with their human rights abuses within China and especially within Tibet. Moving on to economic prosperity, I am a carpenter, and I actually haven't gotten too far with my introduction, but after growing up in Blue Hill, I went to Stanford University and majored in international relations, focusing on environmental policy and the region of Latin America. And excuse me. And I should say, I've dreamed ever since I was a child of creating a world moving beyond war. And I learned of famine as a young boy when I was in 8th grade, was when the terrible famine in 1985 in Ethiopia was happening. And then I learned later in that decade of the destruction of the Amazon rainforest, and I knew these things were wrong. And we are so far on the wrong track right now with the damage that we're doing to the earth and to each other. We really need to go in a dramatically different direction. And but in any case, I, after college, went back and worked as the reporter for the Weekly Packet newspaper in Blue Hill, and then went and got a master's degree in environmental management from the Yale School of Forestry. And 7 years ago, moved to Portland and founded an ecologically sustainable construction company. And having run this company, I've learned a lot about what it takes to grow a business in a very economically challenging environment, in an industry that's very challenged. And I think I would say 4 steps. Well, I'm not sure, but these are some of the steps that I'd recommend for improving economic growth, which is the thing on everyone's mind right now. I'm going to pause. This is all right. Thank you. I'm noticing I'm sort of tending to drone on a little bit. I want to pack some punch here, so I'm going to try to step up the enthusiasm. So, thank you. Thank you for bearing with me. So one thing is the regulatory burden, and I think I should skim over some of these points, but being a small business owner, I really am confronted with the challenges of the regulations, and I think we need to convene panels of small business owners and entrepreneurs and investors and bankers and say, how can we create government policy, how can we reduce the cumbersome nature of these regulations while still maintaining their intention, and how can we simplify the tax code and reform the legal system to make a better environment for small business to thrive and prosper and be the engine of growth in the economy. I think we also need to re-evaluate our trade policy and again stand up to nations such as China and Russia and Iran. We're already boycotting now, but any country, we need to have a level playing field which includes labor standards and environmental standards and also human rights standards. And I think we need to use American diplomacy more effectively. It may have been a mistake to ask you to hold your applause, but it's too late now. It's too late now. We're into it. We're into this plan. It's just something you'll remember. This guy is different from the other 3. And I think it is a good time to invest, but this would do a lot to create jobs. As we're trading with trading partners who are not fair in their standards, let's level the playing field and trade with allies who have similar types of trading of standards. And I do think it's the right time to invest in public works, and I think we need a nationwide rail system, rebuilding the rail system. It's okay. I don't want to ask you what to do. From now on, I'm going to applaud it well. So I have a lot to cover that I may not get to at all. Yeah, I still don't know. So I think rail, it was a crime that the automobile and bus companies put rail out of business in so many areas, and any of you who've traveled to Europe or other places where there's a good rail system, it's so much more pleasant and fuel efficient. It's time. This would be a huge way to put lots and lots of people back to work. Another thing would be expanding opportunities for public service in the Peace Corps abroad and in a domestic civil service corps, similar to AmeriCorps. But so many people that are unemployed, we have wealthy Americans who could contribute more tax revenue, provide opportunities to get the economy going again. One area in particular is increasing the energy efficiency of our homes and buildings, and this would save would both create jobs, reduce our carbon footprint, and also save fiscal resources. Moving on to ecological sustainability, this is a particular passion of mine, and this is something that as a teenager learning about the Amazon rainforest, I learned, I'm going to pause again and sort of ramp up the enthusiasm once more for this. This is a challenging thing, but you're all doing great. And one of the reasons, thank you, sir. Yeah, I'm getting there, I will. Although that could have been a more pleasant way to say that. I have 5 minutes. Okay, maybe the best part is last. But in any case, seriously, our alteration of the atmosphere is reaching catastrophic proportions. The droughts, the wildfires we're seeing. The nation is, the world is really at risk, and the survival of many species are in danger, including the polar bear, the tiger, and the rhinoceros, and entire ecosystems. Yeah. The main thing we do need is education and increased consciousness. And I'm feeling a little rushed by this one fellow who said wrap it up, but I'll try to, I will try to wrap it up. The education is the key. And so really, the last story I'll tell you is that my parents, and before I do this, I will say, all of you are members of the Democratic establishment. You're like, who is this guy? But when I go to the lumber yard and I meet with the yard manager, when I go to the boat yard, when I talk to people who are completely disengaged from the political process, their enthusiasm for me is palpable, and they're fired up. I couldn't drag them to Augusta in a way of science. That's too much for me to ask. But I am able to inspire people who are outside of the political process and get people engaged and get young people engaged. And this is what we need as leadership in this party. Thank you. I made a mistake. I should have let you applaud all along because it gives me time to relax and get more confident. So I'll learn. The next time I'll do better. If you will permit me another time. Or maybe it'll be the 6 years. I don't know. So anyway, the last story I'll tell you is I grew up, when the day I was born, friends of my parents made a tapestry for me. And it says, my first name is Justin, which I went by until 7 years ago. And it says, Justin Pollard, September 16th, 1972, and there's a picture of a sun, it's just barely above the horizon, and some sunbeams, and it says, a new day is coming. And so this tapestry has been on my wall ever since my birth, and I've looked at it, and I have believed those words, and I have taken them to heart. And I'm not only an idealist, but I'm an optimist, and I'm a pragmatic optimist. I realized when I was a teenager that the trends we were going down led to very unpleasant scenarios, and what we really need is a rapid evolution of our global consciousness. And for that to happen, we need to have people who believe that such a thing is possible. And so I made a conscious decision to believe that we could turn it around. We could lay down all of our arms. We could all work together to restore the environment, to feed the hungry, and to create a peaceful world. And so this is the optimism and the idealism that I carry forth. I do better on a one-on-one setting than in front of a big convention hall. But we need to go in a different direction as a Democratic Party. I think we should be concerned that we only had 19% of the vote in the last gubernatorial election, and that an independent candidate has already been widely considered the presumptive victor, which I think is sad, and I hope the media regrets those prognostications. But we need to reach out more. We need to reach out to blue-collar workers and the middle class, and with a more inspiring, visionary, uplifting, idealistic, optimistic message. And Admiral Lord Nelson, and I will wrap it up with this, Lord Admiral Nelson once said, the boldest measures, I am of the opinion that the boldest measures are the safest. I think we could all agree that the boldest choice for the Democratic candidate for the United Senate would be me. It may or may not be the safest, but it is a risk. But we need someone different. I am different, and I'm young, I'm idealistic, I'm visionary, I'm enthusiastic, I'm passionate. I actually believe, and I say this with all honesty, I actually believe that of the 4 candidates, I actually stand the best chance of defeating Governor King. So I hope you'll consider my candidacy. Thank you very much.